All right, what you're about to watch is an excerpt of a sermon that I did for the church at Ohatch Church of Christ and was recorded here. This is a small portion of that sermon, which I thought may be relevant to you. You may find interesting. But if you'd like to see the greater sermon as a whole, it is also on the channel. And that description of what sermon it'll be will be in the description below. Thanks. And in the Western world where we live, where amassing material wealth is not only condoned but admired, amassing more and more wealth is admired and encouraged. We Christians come to a passage like James 5, 1 through 6, and must grapple with the point that he's making here and ask what it looks like to amass too much. Is that possible? What does that look like in our lives? How should we be looking for those things? And so what we have here is 3 warnings from James about wealth. 3 warnings from James, though implicit, about wealth. James 5, 1 through 6. Listen to this strong language. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person, and he does not resist you. 3 things. The first one is this: wealth is a strong obstacle. It's a particularly strong obstacle, especially to Christian discipleship. Wealth is a strong obstacle to you following the Lord and knowing the Lord and being a disciple of Christ. James speaks so strongly here. We should hear his harshness and hear the warning of the level of strength that money has to harm us. And it's not something new in the Bible for James, right? This is a very biblical idea that wealth is dangerous when it comes to following Christ. Matthew 19:23. Only with difficulty will a rich man enter the kingdom of heaven. There is simply no other way. Only with difficulty will a rich man enter the kingdom of heaven. That is, it is never easy for a rich person to have wealth and to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, as we looked at last week, we don't tend to identify ourselves. Not many people in the world tend to identify themselves as rich because you can always find somebody richer. But in every definition of the word rich throughout the history of mankind, all of us are wealthy, are rich, even compared to the rest of the world modernly. We are rich. Christian commentator Albert Barnes said, he said, there's no sin in merely being rich. Where sin can exist with wealth consists in 3 things: the manner in which wealth is acquired, the way in which wealth is used, and perhaps chiefly, the spirit which wealth tends to engender in our hearts. The spirit which wealth tends to engender in our hearts. Money tends to affect our hearts greatly. Wealth, the desire for it, the way to spend it, tends to affect our hearts greatly. It draws us to it. It causes us to lust after more of it, to trust in it over all things for our security and for our happiness, to numb us to things that really matter, namely to numb us to the battle for holiness. Because you can really only pursue one thing with your heart. You've been called as a Christian to pursue Christ, by extension to pursue holiness. There are few things in the world that will hinder that pursuit more than the pursuit of money, than the pursuit of wealth, than the pursuit of the comfort, or the security, or the power that will come therewith. Alec Mateer says, the more we surround ourselves with possessions that exist only for our comforts, the less likely we are to cultivate the spiritual physique required for battle for holiness. We find ourselves ministering to the spirit of pleasure, desiring and wanting for self, which is the root of all unholiness and unfaithfulness to God. He says the use of money and the life of self-pleasing are never far apart. Ezekiel 7, verse 19. Their silver and gold are not able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. They cannot satisfy their hunger or fill their stomachs with it, for it was the stumbling block of their iniquity. It was the stumbling block of their iniquity. It was the reason that they fell. It was the thing that caused them to fall. Wealth. Wealth is dangerous for your soul. And it isn't just because of the means mentioned here. You could say, well, that's probably true that wealth is dangerous, but I'm just gonna give a lot away, which, by the way, is the best thing for you to do if you're wealthy, is to be overwhelmingly generous. I'm just gonna give a lot away, but here's the difficulty. Here's why it's so dangerous, that even if you do that, even if you are the person who makes a lot of wealth and gives a lot of it, there's still a specific and particular danger that comes with that. There's a special kind of pride with being that kind of giver. There's this new kind of tendency to a new kind of pride. Wealth is dangerous in every avenue, even if you use it to give. The truth is, the Christian must be humble. The Christian must pursue holiness, and it is difficult to be humble and rich. Truly humble in your heart, not just to show humility, but to actually be humble and rich is difficult. To actually pursue holiness and be rich is difficult. Money is like fire. It is a good gift of God to keep us warm, but it easily burns.